for the live stream to go live. And then we'll kick off with a couple in-the-can questions, and then we're going to invite you to ask questions. You'll be able to do that either using the chat function on Facebook or the chat function here in Zoom. And just so those of you who are participating via Zoom are aware, you have the ability to see us and hear us. We don't have the ability to see or hear you. So we'll be communicating through the chat function. You can also use the Q&A function if you like. Same principle as chat. You'll just have to type in your questions. Okay, so it looks like we're live. Isaac, if you want to take us away and give us that introduction piece.
All right, let me get this queued up.
I should introduce who's on the call too, for those of you who don't know us. My name is Kelly Housley Glover. I'm the Long Range Special Projects Planner for Wasco County and the project manager for the Land Use and Development Ordinance Update. I'm joined by, of course, our Planning Director, Angie Brewer, and also the Long Range Assistant Planner, Isaac Statz.
All right, thank you for that, Kelly. And hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Tonight is Wednesday, May 19th, 2001. We are here in Wasco County for our second Ask a Planner live event. All of this information is being recorded, and it will be available to watch at your convenience on Facebook, on our county planning webpage, and at the project website, which is wasco2040.com. As Kelly said, my name is Isaac Statz. I'm the Assistant Long Range Planner here. We do have Kelly and Angie both on the call. They're going to be helping me sort through some of the questions as they come in, and we're all going to be working together to make sure that all of your questions get answered. If not live tonight, then we will definitely follow up with you through email. Tonight's event is for you to submit questions, comment on other people's questions, and participate in polls regarding the Wasco County 2021 and 2022 Land Use and Development Ordinance Update. We call it the LUDO update for short. Tonight we are going to be focusing on the farm and forest zones based on revisions to state law, specifically around agritourism. Our goal is to get to everyone's questions. As I said a little bit earlier, if we do not get to yours, we will reach out to you. And if we see a lot of the same questions coming in, we will go ahead and post that on our FAQ page, our frequently asked questions, which is also found at wasco2040.com. All right, so what is this whole Ask a Planner live event? As I said, this is going to be the chance for you to ask questions live to any of us here. We're going to, I'm going to show you the project webpage and go over a few different ways for us, or for you to participate with us tonight and through the rest of this update process. All right, so we are currently live streaming on Facebook. You can join us there right now. You can chat with us through the Facebook chat function. If you are joining us on the Zoom call, you can chat with us through the Zoom chat function. Those two do not talk to each other, so we will be doing our best to make sure that one question that is asked on one location does get brought up to the entire group. What I have up right now is the project webpage, the LUDO update page. I just wanted to call attention real quickly to the little green icon. That is the agritourism icon, and that is going to be consistent through any documentation, any pages surrounding the addition of agritourism to the farm zones. So just wanted to point that out to you real quick. So different ways to participate. You can send us an email at wcplanning@co.wasco.or.us. The project website is going to be in my opinion, the best place to go. We have a Ask a Planner feature there, which is going to be a really simple way for you to just go ahead and type out a question, send it to us. We get it, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. We also have a submit a comment function that's found just a little bit lower down on that home page there. As I mentioned, you can also find us on Facebook. We are there at Wasco Planners. And if you want to take something and get it physical in your hand, you can come down to the planning office at 2705 East 2nd Street during our open business hours. And we do have some handouts and a little QR code that you can take a picture with your phone in order to get some additional information. We also have some polls and questionnaires and surveys for you to take. So again, want you to get involved with us any way you can. And wasco2040.com is going to be where you can find any and all information about this entire 2-year Ludo update process. And with that, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen and pass this back to Kelly.
Thanks so much, Isaac. Appreciate it. So again, just to remind everybody, tonight's Ask a Planner event, we're focusing on the goal to add the agritourism provisions to the farm zone and the land use and development ordinance, and also going over several mandatory and optional updates to the farm and forest zones. These are changes that have been made to state law since 2012. Some we're required, so we're really trying to focus our energy on the optional updates where we really need that public feedback. And I do have some questions while we're waiting for some questions to come in that have been sent to us ahead of time. Those of you who have joined us on the call, you're welcome to enter questions in at any time into the chat. Same thing if you're watching live on Facebook, enter those in at any time and we'll jump on those immediately. So one of the questions that we received earlier, I believe last week, was will any of these changes that are being proposed for the farm and forest zones impact the minimum parcel size of those farm and forest zones? And that's a great question. I think people, generally when you live in one of these zones, you're aware of the minimum parcel size. What that is, it's either 40 or 160 acres for the farm zone and 80 acres for the forest zones. And that's it's a division standard. It also, sometimes you have to meet it to qualify for certain uses like residentials. We're not proposing any alterations to the minimum parcel size for any of those zones. Really, the focus of these updates are on adding some new uses and then moving around some of the uses from one review process to another, and then adding some additional criteria that's required by state law. So we're not doing anything to the maps. We're not changing where the zone's located. We're not changing that minimum parcel size. But that is a great question that I know folks are interested in. So the one optional update that we have for the F2 zone in particular, that's the forest zone. So we have an F1 zone for forest and an F2 zone. This is specifically for the F2 zone, is for something called an accessory forest dwelling. And that sounds a little bit like accessory dwelling unit. Accessory dwelling unit's really a general umbrella term that's used to talk about secondary house on one piece of property. But accessory forest dwellings are specifically adding a second home in conjunction with resource activity. So in the forest zone, we're specifically talking about logging activity that's occurring on a property. And there are a number of criteria based in state law that you would have to meet to be eligible for this. And we've got it elsewhere on the website, but I can just briefly rattle off those requirements in order to be eligible. As I mentioned, it has to be active forestry. You've got to have an approved forest management plan. Typically, that's going to need to be consistent with the Oregon Forest Practices Act. There is a minimum parcel size requirement of 80 acres, and most of these forestry operations are actually occurring on properties that are 240 acres or they've got 320 acres spread out where they're doing the forestry operation. So we're talking about bigger parcels. The primary home has some regulations about when it was built and how the review process. So that's important to understand. Another big critical function of this to be eligible for this is that it's got to be in a rural fire protection district. And for those of you who live in the forest zone, you're probably familiar with the fact that very few of our forest properties are actually protected by a rural fire protection district. Most of them fall under the jurisdiction of the Oregon Department of Forestry, which isn't, it is really more concerned about the wildland than structural protection. So that's why we really need those dwelling units to be within a rural fire protection district. And that's actually what a requirement of state law. The new dwelling, the accessory dwelling, has to be 200 feet from the primary dwelling. And that's, you know, also complicated by the fact that a lot of our homes in the forest zone are in the sensitive wildlife environmental protection district that has some constraints on where those houses are located. Typically, they need to be within 300 feet of the road. So not a lot of space for development. It's going to be likely pretty crunched to the road. And there's it's because of this clustering principle. They want to keep dwellings close by, you know, not only for fire protection purposes, but also to preserve the landscape for resource use, for forestry use, but also keep it preserved for wildlife habitat. Both people who would be in the dwelling, so the primary dwelling and the secondary dwelling, either have to be owners or relatives of the owners and actively working in that forestry operation. So it can't be used, it can't be rented out on the vacation rental market. It can't be rented out to just an average citizen. It really has to be in conjunction with a forestry operation. And then finally, the state law requires a deed restriction to prohibit any land divisions. So you can't build the house and then suddenly split the parcel and have something available for sale. So again, we want to stress this provision really is to help those forestry operations that we have operating in the F2 zone be sustainable and viable. And it's similar to what we have in the farm zone. We have an accessory farm dwelling that has some similar eligibility requirements and constraints. There is on the website a map, and I want to stress it's an illustrative map, so it's really meant to show possibilities, but it's not a land use decision. So we've done a basic analysis, but it's not going to be 100% accurate. So it's really just supposed to give you an idea of what this might look like, the potential areas where this could occur. And the analysis really showed up. We think about 22 lots in Wasco County in the F2 zone would be eligible for this accessory forest dwelling. So we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of secondary homes, really talking about, you know, a handful. And another great question we got last week was, what happens if, you know, you've met all this eligibility criteria, the second home gets built, and then you have the primary owner die. So the person who's doing the forestry operation dies, or the relative that's helping out. Then what happens? And the reality is, the way the rules written, it doesn't really do a good job at projecting into the future. It's really a lot of our job is looking at the application and the facts of the application at the time of review. So you can imagine, really frankly, that can create some code compliance issues for us in the future. We do have some potentials to write in some deed restrictions. If that's a real concern of the community, we could craft some additional language to require people to put a deed restriction to be very explicit. It can only ever be occupied by people in a forestry operation. And once that use is discontinued, then the house needs to be disassembled. That's something we do with other types of uses. So there are some options, but we really need to hear that concern from the public if that's something that worries you. I just want to pause here. I'm not seeing anything on Facebook. Isaac, are you seeing anything come through Facebook? And Angie, I don't think we have anything in chat yet.
No, we've had a few people pop on and off, but no comments yet.
Okay, great. So again, we're really trying to focus tonight on those state law updates that are impacting the farm and forest zones. But if you have other questions, feel free to pop them in there. We'd love to hear from you, and even if it's just a, hey, how's it going? Or how do you navigate this website? Happy to answer more basic questions too. I'm going to continue. I do have a laundry list of questions that have come in by emails that I'm happy to share. Some people, I got a question about why we weren't doing this optional accessory forest dwelling, why it wasn't available for the F1 zone. And I think that's a great question because it's not always clear what the nuance difference is between those two zones. And the answer is about the time that that zone was created, the creators of that zone had a really specific vision of the intent of the F1 zone. And we've done some analysis, and about 60% of the property in F1 is actually publicly owned. So it's either state lands, it's in trust for treaty tribes. The Dalles, City of the Dalles has some municipal watershed land there. So really, we've got about 40% private ownership, and a lot of that area is in and around some of our water resources. So in addition to protecting the forestry resources, the forest and the wildlife that occurs in the forest, there was also a lot of concern by the founders of that zone in the comp plan that we protect those water resources. And one of the ways that we do that is being really pretty restrictive about residential development in that zone. So there's a specific policy in the comprehensive plan that's been there about since the 90s. And that's echoed in the land use and development ordinance for the F1 zone. I think in the introductory paragraph that really explicitly says, analysis has shown that residential uses and the resources that this zone is intended to protect are incompatible, and therefore we're basically prohibiting residential development. There are some exceptions where we're required to allow residential development to occur in that zone, but generally the guidance that our office has from folks in the past is that we really shouldn't be expanding residential opportunities in that zone. And that's always something we can revisit at a future date. If we hear a lot of feedback from the community now or in the future, it's something we can have a conversation about. But this process, we're really trying to stick to being consistent with what's in the comprehensive plan. So if you're wondering why F2 but not F1, that's sort of the backstory behind that. I'm going to switch away from the forest zone. We've got some great questions about some of the optional updates to the farm zone. And before I do that, just want to check in with Isaac and Angie. Any comments that we're seeing come in yet? Okay, y'all are really quiet tonight.
We did get a thumbs up though. We got a like.
Oh, great. I love those likes. So even if you don't have anything to say, give us some engagement. We don't even care if it's an angry face or a sad face or heart or a like, whatever you want to do. It's great to know you're out there and listening to us and participating. Your participation is super important to this process. So there are several optional updates proposed for the farm zone. And I wanted to highlight really specifically one that I was so grateful. Last week, we had a public presentation followed by a Q&A session. And we had members of the public join us at that point in time. And I was so grateful because one of our very astute community members had some questions about a use in here. And so I need to I did correct it on the website and I did correct it on the draft. But for those of you who are maybe just watching on the Facebook, I think it's important to point out that we have this proposed use that I thought was mandatory. I went back and double checked the bill that it went through the legislature, and it's actually optional. So anywhere in these drafts, you'll see blue text. That means it's bold blue text, that means it's new. And then if you see a squiggly underline under the text, that means it's optional. So we've really tried to make it super easy for you to look at these drafts. We know it's a lot of legalese and jargon, but just visually identify very quickly what's optional and what's mandatory. And in this case, this is a specific tied to wineries, which we do have quite a few wineries in Wasco County. And it's spread throughout the farm zone, both in the scenic area and outside of the scenic area. And this is an optional use to allow a restaurant in conjunction with a winery. And there are some specific regulations that go along with that, but I wanted to highlight that because we didn't highlight that last week as an added use. You can also, sorry, Angie, you wanted to.
I was just, thank you. I was just going to ask you to note what the red text means. Since
yeah, of course.
The blue, yeah.
So red text means that it was moved from a different section. And you can, if you see a hashtag somewhere in the text, that means we moved something somewhere else. So red means moved. Below the reconstruction, you'll see improvement. There's no squiggly line. This means this is a mandatory use that state law is requiring us to add. I can go through. If you see anything that's got a line through it, that means we're proposing to remove it and delete that. And you know, in this case, it's because we needed to separate property line adjustments from subdivisions for some very specific reasons. But you can see here, land divisions for the siting of a utility facility necessary for public service. That's also an optional update. One that normally planners are, you know, we're neutral, we're Switzerland when it comes to a lot of these optional updates. It's really Wasco County residents and property owners plan. But we do want to encourage support for this one in particular because it does, we've run into this issue before. And particularly with doofers, some of the work that they're doing with their sanitary waste facilities. And this is we think a really good fix to some of the issues that we've had in permitting those in the past. So if I can advocate for anything, it's thumbs up to this land division for utility facilities necessary for public service. So I can scroll through this document because I think it's probably a little helpful to take a look at what else we're proposing. Cideries have become really a burgeoning industry in not only Wasco County, but kind of nationally. And we haven't had a way to permit them. We've sort of managed them kind of like wineries, but more like farm uses. And they haven't had all the benefits of being treated like a winery. So they couldn't have tasting rooms and some of those activities. This provision would allow them to basically function very similar to a winery. So we think it's a really good fit for our community, particularly for our orchard grounds. We'd really, but again, this is your plan. We'd like to hear your feedback if you have concerns about that. The nice thing too about some of these optional updates is we're presenting to you what's required by state law with these optional updates, but keep in mind, with land use planning in Oregon, we're allowed to be more restrictive than the state. We can't be less restrictive. So when they tell us we have to do something, we have to do it. But if we want to add some additional rules, some additional regulations, that we're definitely seeing some community concerns with agritourism, for instance, we do have the ability to add those things. So if you're like, cideries sound great, I want to support our orchards, but I've noticed these things with wineries. Hey, can we get a little bit more rules to maybe mitigate some of those concerns? We definitely can do that, and that's excellent feedback. We'd love to see. So any of those ways Isaac talked about to submit comment works great for us. You can always send a letter too. We're happy to receive a letter via the mail. So let me scroll through here. One of the other things that we're asking, it's not an optional use, it's something we already permit. Well, it is optional, but it's something we already permit in Wasco County, are non-farm dwellings. And currently we treat them like a conditional use, which means they have some additional criteria that they have to be evaluated by, and a lot more analysis. The state actually recommends they go through a lower review process. So we're asking, is that something you want to see? Do you want to see it to be a little easier to permit those non-farm dwellings, or do you think it's working really great and let's just leave it alone and keep it the way it is? So that's really great feedback. We'd love to hear from you. If I go down into the conditional uses, that's where we also have a lot of things that I passed the legislature in 2019 is where a lot of this is coming from. Had a busy year that year. So farm breweries is one possible optional use that we're seeing. And it's probably not going to be super common in Wasco County because it really needs to be affiliated with a hops farm. And that's really more of a Willamette Valley kind of thing. But if that's something any of our farmers are interested in pursuing, this would allow them to have a brewery on site. So we'd love to talk about adding that into the code. Something that's really been very popular recently has been horse therapy, horse counseling services. And so there's a provision to potentially allow for those things to occur in the farm zone. And you can see some of the draft here has some specific criteria that they have to meet. I also have heard, seen some questions about what about goats, because goat yoga was really trendy. I don't know if it's still trendy. It was trendy a couple years ago. I've seen some comments floating at the legislative level to maybe expand the therapy category eventually to different kinds of livestock. So that may be an option that we see coming down the pike that would have similar rules to horse therapy. Equine means horse. So again, we'd love to hear feedback. Do you think horse therapy, horse counseling services is a good compatible use with what we have going on in the farm zones in Wasco County? Would you like to see that as an option? I'll scroll back down here and talk about, where'd it go here? I have to poke around here. Oh, guest ranch. Okay. So we've had a couple questions about guest ranches. We have something in the code called farm ranch recreation, which is seems really similar to guest ranch, but there are some nuanced differences. So there have been some additions to the guest ranch provisions with state law. And we decided to take a minute and pause and see if guest ranches were something that we'd like to expand that use in Wasco County in the farm zone. And guest ranches are basically just like they sound. It's lodging units, up to 10 lodging units on an active livestock ranch. So it's not for farming, it's really for animals. And there are some rules and regulations about the lodging units and the size of the farm and meal service and those kinds of things. But this may be something that we want to pursue. So again, an optional update we'd love to hear feedback on. I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment and go back to my other questions here. Check in really quickly. Have we seen any comments or questions on the Facebook or chat? Okay, let me just plow through here. We have some questions. So we use, and unfortunately, we use a little bit of planner speak to describe some of the processes that things are reviewed by, just to help you understand. And I got some feedback from folks like, oh, stop using planner speak. So I wanted to draw attention to a new recent addition to the website. This page is if you look for the brown open book icon, this is all the state law updates that pertain to optional and mandatory uses for farm and forest zones, and then some of the criteria. We've got surveys available here and some polls where any of the stuff we've talked about tonight or any of the things that you're seeing that are optional, you want to give us feedback, but you don't want to submit a comment. That's a really great, easy way to do it. But I wanted to draw attention to the fact that I know some of these terms are maybe new to you, or they may just feel jargony. What I've done here is add the official definitions here on the sidebar. So when I say farm brewery, you know what we mean by that. When I say cidery, you know what we mean by that. And then the review types, because particularly when we're switching from, like the non-farm I talked about, conditional use to a lower standard, a type 2 or a subject to standards, that's a lot of jargon. So this section here, the definitions in the sidebar, will tell you what those things mean and how it impacts the review process. Really what it is it's the process by which the current planning program reviews an application to either approve or deny a new use or a type of development in a zone. So if you have questions about that, you can always ask a planner, use our Ask a Planner function. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there and see what else I've got here on my list. So for the forest, accessory forest dwellings, I mentioned some analysis that was conducted, and I'll go ahead and share my screen again. So if you see this icon that looks like a map, if you click on that, it'll bring up a PDF of this map that our fantastic geographic information systems staff produced. And it's not meant to be diagnostic, so it's just really meant to be illustrative. It's just really meant to give you a picture, but we're not making any of this official. So this is based on some of that criteria, that eligibility criteria that I talked through, where we think potentially these accessory forest dwellings could occur. Lots of other things that we need to do in order to say yes or no. For one critical thing that planners look at is whether the lot was legally created, what process the house went through. So this is much more of a snapshot. We didn't do that detailed level of analysis, but I mentioned again, we thought, based on a rough analysis, about 22 lots would be eligible. And what this map shows is where those rural fire protection districts are in relationship to the F2 zone. And then we also ran the analysis about which properties were over 80 acres, because again, that's one of the eligibility criteria. So you can see a couple options up by Mosier, a couple on the west side of the Dalles, and then if you go down, fly south, a couple around Wamak and a couple around Pine Grove. So again, not likely to blanket the forest zone with new houses, but it does give you a picture of where we might see some of this activity. We're the community to say, yes, let's go ahead and pursue this. Okay. I'm going to pause for a minute and see if we have any comments that have come in.
No comments on Facebook yet.
Okay. It doesn't look like we have anything in the chat.
Nope, nothing on the chat. I would just add to that, to your last topic, Kelly, that adding an additional dwelling unit, an accessory dwelling unit, assumes there's already an existing dwelling on the property. And given that zone is more difficult to pursue for a single family dwelling than most of our other zones, that's another limiting factor. That if people haven't considered that, it's those properties highlighted in the map meet some pretty basic zoning and size sifts through the GIS, but whether or not they contain a dwelling right now and would otherwise qualify, it's just something else to consider, I think, for folks. Yeah, for
sure. So since we don't have a lot of questions tonight, we've got a new participant here. Let's maybe give them a minute to chat. Angie, Isaac, any questions that you guys can think of folks might be interested, or anything you think we should walk through for folks?
Well, I really appreciate your flag for folks to provide comment on agritourism and any of these topics, but in particular, we've heard a little bit from folks about agritourism concerns. And I would just encourage people to think about the nuisance impacts and the compliance impacts that are specifically concerning to them. Obviously, we've heard about increase to fire and emergency service providers, but also think about things like noise, smells, and other sort of quality of life type nuisance issues that we would have the potential to draft code to address specifically. But we can't do that without feedback. We can't be arbitrary about it. So if we don't receive any concerns, you know, we have a increasingly difficult time addressing that on our own in a vacuum.
That's such a great point, Angie. Thanks for bringing it up. And one thing I wanted to highlight too, again, we try to make this as easy as possible. So we have a comment function on the website you can just hit. It'll give you a form. You can enter some information. But another way we try to make this so easy, so it only takes a couple seconds to give that level of feedback is, as Angie mentioned, 2 things we've heard so far people are worried about with agritourism is wildfire. Not surprising to those of us who've lived through, you know, 1 or more bad wildfire seasons. And this nuisance issue, which is, hey, I need a notice when my neighbors are going to have some kind of big event so that I can plan my life, you know, I can plan my life around that, because it can be noisy, it can be disruptive. So what we did was took those comments and we developed a poll, and I've got it here on the screen. If you look, Isaac pointed out the agritourism icon. That's the green square with a sign with a barn and a silo. If you look for that, you hit that, you're going to find this poll, and it only takes a couple seconds. You can tell us, do you think we need to look at a wildfire mitigation plan? So that's when we give them they tell us some specific things about what they're going to do to reduce the risk for wildfire. And we'd love specific feedback on that. If you've got some ideas like, I'm really worried about people flicking their cigarettes, then that's great feedback. We can add that into the criteria. As I mentioned, you want an annual notice. You're like, okay, my neighbor's going to do some agritourism, but I need to know, and I want to know ahead of time, because maybe I want to head out of town when they're having a harvest festival. So we could require an annual notice that they send to adjacent properties, and they also send to county, and then we could promote it more broadly to the public. So we have those options. So if you think one, you think both, you can fill that out. If you think, nah, let's not bother, you can tell us that. Or there's this other category where you can enter in specifically like, I think both, but I also think this, or this is what I'm really worried about. You can put it, and it literally takes just a couple of minutes. And we've already gotten some great feedback. I can tell you right now where we're sitting, the majority of respondents are really pushing for us to include both a wildfire mitigation plan and a requirement for event notices. And so staff is behind the scenes working on criteria that we will be presenting to the Planning Commission in August to review. So that's why your feedback is so important to us, is it'll give us direction to kind of make some tweaks, make some edits, make some optional suggestions that the Planning Commission can really review when it gets to them. We do have a couple more participants joining. Those of us who've joined us on the Zoom call, just so you know how this functions, there's a chat. So we can't see you, we can't hear you. We know you're there though. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask us, just use the chat function. You just need to type it in. We're going to read that question out loud and then try to answer it the best we can. And then check in on Facebook here. Looks like
Hey, Kelly.
Yeah.
Do you maybe just want to let everyone know that the chat function is found at the very bottom of the window in case
Yeah, that's great. It looks like a little thought bubble. And if you just click on that thought bubble down at the bottom of the screen, and there's a black bar where kind of your mute function is and all of that, if you just hit on that, it'll bring it up on your sidebar, and then you can just type, it'll say type a message. And you can type it to all the panelists or the panelists and the attendees. So maybe you're shy, you don't want everybody to see your question. You can just hit it for staff here.
And then the only other thing I would mention is just reiterating the participation that we've already been hammering on tonight. And you know, if you've got other people that are involved or have stakeholders or property owners or you know, anything, just the more the more data, the more information we can get, the better it'll be.
That's absolutely right. And we want to hear from you frequently and in whatever form is comfortable for you. That's why we've tried to create so many different mechanisms to hear from you and to get you involved. So while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to, brave enough to ask us a question, and like I said, it could be anything. We're focused tonight on state law updates to farm and forest zones and the agritourism provisions. But if you want to ask about the Chapter 2 and the Chapter 21 updates or the upcoming environmental protection updates, we can cover that tonight too. I did want to highlight next week, we're going live with our environmental protection updates. We're making some changes to 8 of the currently 14 environmental protection or overlay zones. So the virtual open house is going to go live on Monday, probably about 9 in the morning. And then we have another one of these Ask a Planner events, I believe on Thursday. So we'll be live once again on Facebook and on Zoom, ready to answer your questions. And then we're going to have a few more of these Ask a Planner events through the summer, June and July, to answer any questions that you have ahead of our Planning Commission work session in August. So lots of time to give us feedback, lots of time to ask questions, lots of time to submit comments, and read the drafts. One of the things that I've been stressing at all these events, because those of you who've been around for a while, you probably were paying attention during the comprehensive plan update process. And I know some people are really frustrated because it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of reading. The land use and development ordinance is over 500 pages. It's a lot. And we're not updating the whole thing this year, but we're updating a lot of it. And that means a lot of pages that you're having to sit through. So that's why we're kind of doing this on a rolling basis. And we're giving a lot of time for public feedback because we want you to feel comfortable, because maybe you can only do 1 or 2 pages a day because you got busy lives and busy work lives. Want to give you that opportunity to really digest this information, and you know, it's technical. It's not like opening a novel, so it's not like you're having a ton of fun when you're reading it. But I really encourage you to get involved early so that you have the time to sift through these documents, read them, understand them, and ask those questions. Because if you wait until September, when we're going through the official adoption process with the Planning Commission and the board, you're going to have a huge stack of stuff to read. It's you know, I think our last packet last year for the comprehensive plan update was over 600 pages, pretty close to 700 pages. You're probably going to be looking at similar page numbers to that. So reading this stuff, engaging with this stuff early would be really helpful. And then, like Isaac said, we just want to hear from you. I think Angie said it too. It's so important to our process to hear from you.
Well, I think it's important to add that people can submit comment in pieces, right? As these chapters are rolled out, you can submit comments on these individual chapters that will all be coalesced and part of the record, and and how we make final revisions and proposals and recommendations to the Planning Commission. So don't feel like you have to submit one comment letter and that's the end. That's your last chance. We want to hear from you as often as you want to talk to us and as often as you have a chance to plug into these things. Kelly has done a great job with the website, creating all sorts of different ways for you to plug in. And of course, you can always pick up the phone or, schedule some kind of telemeeting with us. We're willing to accommodate you in any way you'd like to. So just to reiterate what Kelly said, please track this with us as we progress, because it is going to accumulate into a big packet towards the end of the summer. But lots of time, like she said, lots of time to invest right now, and we'd love to hear from you. Like I said, as often as you'd like to talk to us, we're here and available.
So I'm not seeing anything in the chat or on Facebook. Checking with you guys though that are monitoring that. Are you seeing any questions? So we can just talk about, maybe it'd be helpful to let people know why we've got so many state law updates to do. That's something we haven't talked about yet, and probably a little confusing. So the last update we did some cleanup just behind the scenes cleanup of the Ludo and hyperlinked some things and kind of cleaned it up a couple years ago. But that doesn't go through a legislative process because it doesn't change the language. But the last major update we did as a department was, I think it was 2015 or 16, Angie, when we went through the marijuana regulations, and we were laser focused on those marijuana regulations. So that's allowing the time, place, and manner rules related to marijuana. And at that point in time, we didn't look at any of these other legislative updates. Our scope was really small. So the last time we did any kind of like large scale update to the land use and development ordinance was in 2012. So that's really why we've got quite a few things to talk about. And as I mentioned, we saw a whole lot of new optional updates hit the farm zone in particular in 2019 and 2020, which is why we didn't address these things during the Wasco County 2040 process. So we did talk to people during Wasco County 2040 about agritourism to get the public feedback about that. But some of these other uses, the farm breweries, the gas ranches, those hadn't gone through the legislature yet. So we had no way of anticipating that when we set our work plan with the state for the comp plan updates. So we knew eventually we'd get to the rulemaking, which is the land use and development ordinance update. And we knew at that time we were probably going to have to pull in these legislative updates. And that's what we're doing now. So I think it's important to understand that's why we've got about a decade worth of kind of cleanup to do with the mandatory changes. And then we've got, this handful of optional uses. And we're excited about the optional uses just to offer more opportunities for residents. But again, like I said, there's one of these uses, the utility facilities, which we know probably most people wouldn't get excited about. Planners get excited about it, but that would be the one thing I would say, yeah, let's definitely do that. The rest of them, we really need to hear from the public. We're very neutral about whether we think the community is going to like that or not. And certainly we know the Planning Commission, they're going to have a role in sort of representing the populations that they represent and having an opinion about moving forward with some of these optional updates. But it really helps them and also the Board of County Commissioners do their job by hearing from you guys. So even if it's a poll, even if you just take the poll a couple seconds or the surveys, maybe a couple minutes, really helpful to help those decision makers do their best work for you. So if you take away anything tonight, it's, try to give us your comments or feedback, however works for you. I'm not seeing any other kinds of comments come through. I just wanted to give a few more minutes to those of you who are watching via Zoom and on Facebook to write any questions or comments that you have at this point in time. We really want to hear from you. I can go over really quickly the things that we're talking about tonight. We're interested in hearing feedback about. So state law updates to the farm and forest zones. We've got some required mandatory updates to both of those zones. These are all covered in depth. We've got a slideshow on the landing pages. You can also read the drafts. There's a cover sheet on the drafts that ticks through all these things. So it should be really easy to understand. But I wanted to highlight the things that we're most interested in hearing public feedback about these optional uses. That includes for the F2 zone, the accessory forest dwelling. And then for the farm zone, we've got a laundry list of things that we want to hear about: farm breweries, cideries, guest ranches, this winery and restaurant in conjunction with winery, horse therapy and counseling services, whether or not we move the non-farm dwelling review process. So when you, again, looking through those drafts, if you look for the bold blue text with the squiggly lines under it, or non-farm, it's going to be red with a squiggly line under it. Those are the optional updates that we really want the laser focus on, because that's what we most need the public feedback about. Mandatory updates, as you probably know, they're mandatory. We have to do them. State law requires it. So you can maybe help us tweak some of the language. Grammar, we love grammar feedback, or punctuation and that kind of thing. But for the most part, the substantive pieces of that mandatory stuff has to stay put. So I'm not seeing any more comments or questions. Just looks like we got a comment from
We're quiet on Facebook.
Chris, who says, this is great. Great job. Thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate the vote of confidence and the support. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm just going to pause, give one more minute to those of you who are participating via Zoom or watching us on Facebook to enter any questions that you have. And if not, we'll end a little bit early tonight.
I don't have any questions coming through this chat feature, but I did just plug the submit a comment page in the chat feature for the Zoom participants. So I don't know if we want to plug that into the Facebook feed as well. But just a reminder where folks can get our contact information and follow up for more.
Yeah, Isaac, do you want to pop that slide back up that you had from your slide deck with the how to participate information would be great. And then you put the submit a comment function you said on the, oh. Got another comment. Thank you, Dustin. Dustin wants us to keep going for another couple minutes. Thanks, Vicki. Appreciate your kind words and votes of confidence, people. I started to feel a little bit like an infomercial. I was doing a lot of talking, so I appreciate that I wasn't putting you all to sleep. Okay, so Isaac let you know, here's the project website. Here's what it looks like. It's busy, but it's fun. There's lots to do there. He showed you the Ask a Planner, so maybe you're too shy to ask a planner tonight. But you can ask a planner in the privacy of your own home, and we'll get back to you via email, or we can set up a phone call if you'd rather talk on the phone. You can email us. The general email is wcplanning@co.wasco.org.us. If you can't copy that down, you can't handwrite that fast enough, it is on the Wasco County website under our page, the planning department page. So you should be able to find that. The project website, it's a standalone website from the county website. It's wasco2040.com. You can also, we've archived all the comp plan information there. So if you want to look back at the references or look at any of the blog posts or any of that information, it's all still there. We're just really focused on the Ludo update. Isaac mentioned you can check us out on Facebook at Wasco Planners. We are every day we're posting something about wildfire awareness because it's Wildfire Awareness Month, and we really want our county to be prepared for the wildfire season. It's the first time in 40 years they've declared a fire season this early. It's unseasonably dry out there, so we really want to be prepared as a community. So follow us. Isaac's been rolling out great tips for how to get prepared, how to prepare your home, create defensible space. So please check us out there. You can friend us. We're like a person rather than an organization, so we can be friends. And that's a good way to keep in touch too. We do all kinds of postings related to the Land Use and Development Ordinance update. And we're also live streaming here now. So if you just want to tune us on your phone on Facebook, maybe you're motoring around or outside enjoying the weather, you can still watch us there. And then Isaac mentioned, for those of you who really don't love the website, it's just too much for you, we do have some handouts that really try to capture all that information available in the vestibule. What we mean by vestibule is there's a little glass area outside of our office, which is still closed, where there's business cards for everybody. So you can pick up my business card, Angie's, Isaac's, and any of the current planners. And then you'll also see material related to this update that you can pick up and take with you, and then fill out we've got a survey about these optional uses. You can just tick through it really quickly. If you have any other suggestions for information that would be helpful for you over the next couple months as you're trying to process all that information, and you're like, yeah, this isn't really helpful. I'd like to see more of this, or you've got feedback, even if it's critical about any of the work we've done, we want to hear that because we really, again, can't stress enough how important it is for your participation and us to hear from you. Not seeing anything else tonight, so I think with just a few minutes to go, we'll wrap it up here. Angie, anything that you would like to add?
Just a huge thank you to the amazing staff doing the heavy lift on this and the amazing residents who continue to participate in this work. And just to repeat, this will be repetitive for folks who've been tracking us for a while, but I am just so excited to be modernizing our plans and our regulations to carry the community's vision forward and make progress where the residents want to see it happen. So we're doing our very best to meet that need for you all, and it's been a couple years in the making, and we're cresting a little bit of a finish line here very soon. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's feeling really good. So just a thank you to everyone involved, and a lot of optimism and creativity on our side to meet those needs. And please give us a call if you have any questions or any concerns. And if you get lost in the timelines or, worried about any of the details, we fully appreciate the devil's in the details, and we're here to help you. So give us a call anytime, and look forward to seeing some of the familiar names and faces on the next call. But like Kelly and Isaac both said earlier, please tell your friends and neighbors, please share these links, please get the word out so we can do the best possible job in addressing the community need and vision. And we look forward to more of this through the rest of the summer.
That's right.
It'll be fun.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great evening. I'm going to end the call now.